Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of the Latter-day Lives podcast. This is episode number 61, and I am your host, Sean Rapier. So glad you decided to join us again this week. We've got a fantastic show. Before we get into the show itself, I received a few letters this week. And thank you so much to those of you who take the time to write to me. It just means the world. And some of them are very personal. Others are just thoughts on the show, and I appreciate it. I wanted to share one this week that particularly touched my heart. I'm going to withhold the name because I didn't ask for permission to share the name, but it reads like this. Dear Sean, I'm not even sure where to start. A little intro. I'm a Latter-day wife and a mother of 3 little saints. My journey as an adult in our faith has not been simple or easy or, quote, standard. I found your wonderful podcast last year. You had less than 10 episodes. I just want to say thank you. It's been a gift. I thank you for all your work. It's a highlight to each week. I've loved each episode, and I'm sure I have cried and laughed and come close to peeing myself sometimes listening to these awesome interviews. You know what? You and me both, actually. I love learning about other members. I love hearing faith-building moments. I love making the connections we all have as children of Heavenly Father. I share your podcast with everyone I know who listens to podcasts. It has helped me connect with members in my ward. I love my brothers and sisters in my ward more because of what you've shared and the great guests you've had. Please note, we are listening. Keep going. This is a star in the vast podcasting universe, sending happiness and blessings your way. What a tremendous email that was. Thank you so much. It touched my heart, and I replied back, and I wanted to share it because of this. This listener said, my path has not been normal or standard. Thank heavens. Thank heavens it hasn't been, right? I mean, that's what makes things interesting. And that's part of the reason for the show is you look at how many of us have such different paths in our lives that lead us back to the Savior. And I just love, love, love the faith shown by this listener. And what a wonderful message. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Okay, on to the show this week. My guest, Kurt Frankham, has been a friend and a mentor. He is one of the early pioneers in the Latter-day Saint podcasting movement. And I need to give a caveat before we start, because Kurt is the most amazing guy with so much energy. And when we recorded last week, I was in the middle of a brutal cold. And when I listen back to the episode, I'm definitely not my normal self in that interview. Thankfully, Kurt has enough energy for 10 of us. He is one of the smartest, just best, most energetic, enthusiastic guys you'll ever hear, and his story is fantastic. And the things he does to build the kingdom, I just love Kurt, and I'm so glad that he's here. And this week in my Latter-day life, I'm going to tell you about something that happened 24 years ago that's especially relevant to me this week. It's all coming up, so sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's conversation. And today it is my pleasure in the Latter-day Lives studio, which is where we are now, to have an icon, literally an icon in the Latter-day Saint podcasting world, host of LeadingLDS. We're going to talk all about that stuff. Kurt Frankham, welcome to the show.
Wow, it is a pleasure to be here, and I'm typically in my own podcasting world, so it's fun to visit other universes.
Yeah, this is you get to be here instead, so you know the process on all this. In fact, I'll let our audience know we've been having some technical difficulties. Just getting it up and running is a miracle. So
it's good to see other people struggle with this too. So
gosh,
this has been good for me.
I think all podcasters have their own technical issues at times.
Yeah.
It's good when it happens with another podcaster.
This is how we learn, Sean.
Yes.
That's right.
So Kurt was actually very instrumental early on with the Latter-day Lives podcast. I reached out to you like 1 week after I had gotten started.
Yeah.
How many letters or emails do you get of, hey, I'm going to start a podcast?
I get them from time to time. It's not daily or weekly by any means, but podcasting is such a fun medium, and it's becoming larger and larger, and so everybody wants to get in and share their story or talk about a subject that they're passionate about. And so, from time to time, I'll get individuals that say, hey, how is it that you do that thing? How do you get it to show up on Apple Podcasts, on Stitcher, on all these things? And so I encourage them and walk them through, but few last, and that's okay, like many projects. But you have lasted, Sean. I'm proud of you.
Yeah, I've made it. I've made it past a year, which was amazing. Now, you have had more than 300 episodes of LeadingLDS. So I want to hear all about it and how it all got started. But before we do, let's go back to a young Kurt Frankham.
Oh, yes.
Yes. Tell us a little bit about where you're from, where you grew up.
So I grew up in West Valley City, Utah, and I was not a gangbanger. It's actually quite a nice place to raise a family, and I made it out alive and well with no felonies on my record. And so
it's funny. West Valley has a little bit of a reputation,
It does.
as being a tougher part of Utah, and I don't know if I don't know that it's always deserved. I've always had nice experiences there.
I think sometimes I have to look at the recent statistics, but it's been the second largest city in Utah, and so there's just a lot of geography in that city. So there are some areas that are pretty rough, but for the most part, it's a great place in Utah in the Salt Lake Valley to live and grow up. So.
It's awesome. How many siblings did you have?
So I'm the youngest of four. I have two older brothers and a sister.
Yeah.
And so and I'm sort of I want to say the black sheep, but I turned out a little bit different. Let's just say they don't have their own podcast, and nor do they have any interest in starting a podcast. But nonetheless, we're all different in our different ways. But But
did you grow up in the church?
Yeah, pretty typical, very traditional story. Baptized at 8. My dad was bishop growing up, and I remember those experiences. And jumped through the youth hoops and deacon, teacher, priest. Went on a mission. Did it all, and pretty typical. And my family's a bit unique. A lot of people, it makes my mom roll her eyes when they say, "Oh, I wish our kids turned out like the Francoms," and we're like, "Well, we're just normal people. They're doing our best. It's not like they had something figured out."
Yeah.
But we're all very active. Me, actually. When I was bishop, my two other brothers were bishop at the same time.
No kidding. You're 3 bishops at the same time.
So Sunday dinners were fun because we'd be like, what did you see this week? What happened in your world, right? But it was great. It was a special time of in my relationship with my brothers when that happened. But so people sort of look like we figured something out. But, we've got our own problems and struggles.
As all families do.
Yeah.
Right?
So,
I mean, everybody does.
Yeah.
So now also as a kid, though, you were an artist from a young age.
Yeah.
When did you discover you were an artist?
When I wanted to draw Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Of course.
That's how I made it through sacrament meetings. It was drawing Michelangelo and Donatello in turtle form. And, I just as a kid, like I think most kids, I loved drawing. And I was enchanted by, Disney movies. I was like 8 when Little Mermaid came out, and then that started this movie after movie of all these incredible Disney movies.
Right.
I was just enchanted by that art form, and I always dreamt of someday that I'm going to do that. I'm going to draw for Disney and make these incredible movies. And spoiler alert, that is not what happened. But
not where you ended up. Yeah,
no.
But all of us. I mean, that's all of us. We all have something as a kid that we think, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I was born to do. And then it turns out, well, we do something else we love.
No, but I appreciate that experience and the talent it developed. And I went through high school, drawing and painting. And I was the Sterling Scholar for Granger High School in 2000 for visual art. Okay, and the reason I was a Sterling Scholar is because I was the only person that applied to be the Sterling Scholar.
So, wait, is that a true story?
Absolutely, because my brother, who's a smarty pants, he full ride to BYU. He's an electrical engineer. He was the Sterling Scholar in math.
Look at what you can accomplish just when they say apply yourself.
I know, right?
What they literally mean is just apply.
I know, and so it came around, and I found out nobody was applying. Like, I'm grabbing that.
I'm all
award.
over it.
Yeah, and so it was on every one of my college applications. And
Sterling Scholar. Do you get anything for being a Sterling Scholar?
Your photo in the newspaper.
Yeah. That's a big deal.
Other than that.
But that really is a big deal. I mean, photo in the newspaper when you're that age.
Yeah, it felt big.
Huge. So. Was your mom super proud?
Oh, of course. No,
yeah.
Did
you get the sticker? My son is a Sterling Scholar or anything like that.
We weren't the bumper sticker type, but
gotcha.
I'm sure that was available.
Yeah. So where'd you go after high school?
So after high school, I went to UVSC, which is now UVU, to start my journey on becoming a Disney animator. And I was the younger in my grade, and obviously at that time, missions didn't happen until 19. So I spent a year there with.
How was your experience at UVSC, which is now UVU?
It was nothing to note. I don't know.
Yeah.
It was fine,
here's a question that ties back more into your Leading LDS side. I also had that year, from turning 18 when you got to wait till you're 19 to go.
Right.
Now I watch our young men, because I've worked in young men quite a bit. I'm watching our young men that it's high school and they're putting in their papers, or it's pretty soon after for a lot of them. What's your take on the difference between that 1 year gap that you and I had versus what young men face now?
It's an interesting transition, and it's interesting to watch it now that we're a few years into this, because I think about myself. I was so excited to go on a mission, and there's more story behind that, but I couldn't go soon enough, and I was the youngest in my grade, and so I was anxious to go. And so I know for a fact that if I could have gone when I was 18, I would have gone, and it would have been But at the same time, it was helpful for me to get out of the house for a year.
Yeah, to spend a year.
Yeah, feel like understand what it's like being away from mommy for a good year. And and it was interesting. I had a roommate that had a Angel Moroni tattoo.
Yeah. Oh, no way.
Yeah. So, and I guess part of the story is I'm a diehard BYU fan. Always want to go to BYU.
Yeah.
They've rejected me 3 times that I've tried. So I went to UVSC sort of like, well, I'm going to get the Provo experience, right? Yeah. So I went down to Provo, and I was in BYU housing. And I remember the first day moving in, and this guy walks in. He was like in his late 20s, had an Angel Moroni tattoo, and one day he was in his last year of law school at BYU. Obviously, a very interesting character. I'll see if I can get him on the podcast for you. But nice guy, nonetheless. I'm not throwing judgment out there for his tattoos. But it is unique to have an Angel Moroni.
Yeah, an Angel Moroni tattoo is very unique.
And one day, I remember coming home from school. I walked in the door, and he had all these calendars of a temple calendar laid out and photocopies of the temple, and he was measuring the San Diego temple on his knee and thinking, well, I was like, you know what, maybe if you're into tattoos, that's great, but how about
there are other ways to honor
how about some
the
barbed wire or something? Maybe leave the temple off of your temple.
Oh,
anyways,
that's so funny.
So I had a unique experience that way, and
sure.
And then I had another roommate that had no business living on his own. He had some mental limitations that I was quickly becoming his caretaker until I called his family and said, listen, you need to come pick him up. This is not going to work. So it was a good experience. Just get out, understand what it's like to live on my own, to take care of myself. And little did I know the impact that first part of my mission would have. So it was very much needed, where I'm not sure how well I would have done just running out onto the airplane at 18.
Yeah.
So
I see some upside and some downside. There's, on the one hand, I don't know if you did, I had some friends who probably would have gone at 18, but that year was a little bit limbo. And it was kind of like, do I go to school? Do I not? Should I just work and save up? And I got to wait. And I had some friends who were ready to go.
Yeah.
And then in that year got a little bit lost and ended up not going. The flip side of it is you're a lot more mature at 19 than you are at 18.
Yeah.
You've had that time. You're not swinging straight out of high school into the mission. So
yeah, I think the main focus there is just making sure that individual has a strong purpose in their life. Are they going to school? Are they?
Yeah.
I even interviewed one guy, Jeff Thatcher, who talked about his youth experience, and he didn't want to go on a mission, so his parents made him go. I think he was like in the Peace Corps or something. Like they made him go somewhere and do something, and he came back with so much purpose that he then served a mission. And so I think that the trick is just making sure there's purpose, because like
make sure you're doing something.
Yeah, you can get a job, you can sort of just hang out waiting for that birth date to come around, and then you fade or you lose it. So,
yeah, that's happened.
Yeah.
So tell us where you got called on your mission.
So I got called to Sacramento, California.
Yes.
Northern Mexico, as I sometimes call it. I was Spanish-speaking missionary. And I remember opening the call, and we were talking about this before, that it doesn't matter where you're getting sent, there's always an applause, always a cheer.
Everybody's excited.
Yeah.
And it always ends up being an amazing mission.
Right. And I remember opening it and reading Sacramento, California, and just thinking, that's just down I-80. Like,
yeah,
9 hours away. Like
it's literally one freeway from here. Like,
absolutely.
You get on the 80 in Salt Lake, and you get off in Sacramento.
Yep, that's it. So I remember just sort of having this. Okay, I guess I've been to California before. I can do this, right? And I was excited to speak Spanish and kind of add that to my skills. And off I went. And during this, I was like I mentioned, I was so excited to be a missionary. I'm awesome. The typical
Gung-ho.
I hope they call me on a mission, right? Like, I was ready to go. I was the youngest of four, like I mentioned. All of them had gone. I've seen the pictures. I got the letters. All my friends had gone. And I'm like, okay,
You're ready.
Now is my time. And so, July 3rd, 2001, I entered the MTC. And up to that point, I mean, and back then they had the cry room, right? You remember the cry room?
Of course,
yes,
They show the movie.
They show the movie.
They tell you what's going to happen.
I don't even know if that's correct Japanese, but everybody's singing "Called to Serve," right? And then they
Did you just quote from the Called to Serve VHS?
Oh yeah,
that
absolutely.
is awesome. That
it's
was
on
a
YouTube.
Great call out. Awesome. Susame is the only line I know from it because of that movie.
Right.
Sure.
And get to the cry room. I was still sighing. My family's crying. I'm sort of getting teary-eyed, but like, I'm there. I'm out. So, and it wasn't maybe an hour or two when suddenly the reality of my situation set in. Like, like, wow, my family really isn't here, and I don't know these other people, and I think I want to go home now. Like, a lot of anxiety coming through. And I remember those. And you have these long meetings, and time just slows down.
Yeah.
And everybody talks about, wow, those 2 years, they just zoom by, wow. And there I am like, well, no, I'm day 2, and this doesn't seem to be zooming by, And it was tough. Those first weeks in the MTC, I remember I literally couldn't eat. Like, I would put food in my mouth, I would chew it, but my body would not allow me to swallow it.
Wow.
Like, I was just so much anxiety, homesickness. And I remember one of my MTC teachers, I'm learning Spanish, and he met with everybody in the class and, just going through some Spanish concepts. And I remember it was just boiling up. I felt it. And all of a sudden I just lost it, just crying like a baby. And this teacher's probably like, oh my goodness, what is happening, right? So
the teachers are pretty young too.
Right, yeah. But he handled it great, gave me a blessing. And that was, I think, it got to a point I was holding so much emotion in, I needed a release. So that was like day 4, right? Like, but anyways, I remember.
Oh, Kurt, that's rough.
I got through it. 2 months passed. Okay, we're going to Sacramento, and I get to Sacramento, and it was all those anxieties and feelings came rushing back.
Yeah.
And I remember preparing for my mission. The Sacramento mission sent out this letter saying, okay, we need you to box up all your bedding, your pillows, your sheets, your comforters, send them out to Sacramento, and then they'll be there once you're done with the MTC.
No kidding. I've never even heard of that.
Yeah, so that's just what they did. So I remember showing up. I met my trainer, walk into our apartment, and there is this box that my mom had helped me pack there on my bed. I'm like, okay, I guess those are my sheets. I hate life right now, but at least I have somewhere to sleep.
At least I got my own sheets.
Yeah. So I'm just like, I'm just really having a hard time with the transition of being a missionary. And so I open up this box and dump out my pillows, my sheets. And at the bottom of this box, there is a fun-size M&M package, peanut M&Ms with a note on it. So my mom had put this in there.
Oh, how nice.
And it's sweet. So I pull it out, and then it says, I'm so glad you are where you want to be. Love, Mom. And I threw that thing in the box. I don't think I even ate those M&Ms. I was so mad. I'm like, this is not where I want to be.
This isn't where I want to be. I want to be home.
This is not what I expected. There's not these glorious experiences every minute of the day.
Not to mention, can I just say Sacramento in August? Oh, that's a rough combination. Yeah. That's a hot place. Were you in Sacramento proper?
So I started in Stockton.
Yeah. Gosh, forget what I said about Sacramento. Right. Stockton, even harder. Yep. Were you driving? Because Stockton's quite spread out.
With Spanish missionaries, we had a car, so I had the car my whole mission.
Did you spend a lot of time, since you were Spanish speaking, in Stockton? I mean, this is for people who don't know. Central Valley, California, agriculture central, and there are a lot of, especially Mexican workers who go work on the farms and the dairy farms and the growers and everything else. Did you spend a lot of time with Mexican immigrants that way?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And incredible stories about, their families back in Mexico, and they come here every year, and they work their heart out and send all the money back, and they're just...
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's inspiring stories for sure. So, but anyway, so I got, as we all do, we get through the anxieties, the homesickness, right? Sure. And I remember... flashing forward, I'm month 2021. I'm doing it. I mean, I'm in full missionary mode.
Oh, yeah.
I'm in my routine. I got the Spanish down. I'm doing great, right? So I'm serving as a district leader, and we're in this apartment. And there's another set of elders, and we are always in an apartment with 2 sets of missionaries. And so I'm in this apartment, and there's this greenie in there. And, I'm his district leader, and I'm sort of keeping my eye on him. And I can tell one day during breakfast, I could just see it in his eyes.
Yeah, know it's coming. Yeah.
The same feelings I was going through. So I said, we're going to do some exchanges today. So I'll go with Elder Muffet, and you can go with my companion. And I remember I just got him in the car. We drove a little bit, and then I pulled over. And I stopped the car, and I looked at him, and I said, "This is not what you expected, huh?" He was like, "No." You're feeling a lot of hopelessness and sadness, and you want to go home, right? Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
And this was such a precious moment of my development as a person, because it was like in that moment, it wasn't necessarily a vision, but I could feel God reach into my soul and say, look at what I made you into becoming, and look how far you've come. Look what you are now. And it was in my personal development, it was such a precious experience to
great moment.
Look at Elder Muffet and say, you know what? I feel home at Sacramento, and I promise you'll get there. And it just was testament to me as I went home, realizing, wow, if I can just let go of some of these personal anxieties and trust in the Lord, it's amazing what He can allow me to become. And so,
that's an awesome story.
Obviously, I love my mission. That. I mean, what it did for me and what I became, and really set me up for the life that I've lived so far.
Yeah.
So
you come home from Sacramento. Did you come back to Provo?
So I came back. I did another year at UVSC and got my associate's degree in art. And then I realized, okay, I'm not that good at art. I'm probably not going to make the ranks of the Disney animation studios.
How did you realize? Because you're an amazing artist. Is it just economies of scale, like artists know where their cap is?
You can say I'm maybe an amazing caricature artist.
Okay.
But as far as like drawing, I can't draw the same thing twice, and that's very important to be an animator.
I get that.
Right? And so I just thought, I'm going to have to get real here. I don't want to be a starving artist. Maybe I'll go into business. And again, that's when I got my third rejection from BYU. And so I swallowed my pride, went to Salt Lake, and attended the University of Utah as a closet BYU fan.
Did you ever wear your BYU gear on U of U campus?
No, even better. Okay, I wasn't planning on telling the story. Even better. So speaking of my art, I never wore a shirt. I mean, I wasn't looking to get mugged, but. So I had the student, what's it called? The University Chronicle, I think it is, just a student newspaper.
Yeah.
I opened up one day and I saw that somebody was doing editorial cartoons. I'm like, oh, that looks fun. I want to do the editorial cartoons. So I contacted the paper and I started drawing 2-3 times a week a cartoon that they would print in the paper.
Awesome.
About editorial cartoon, about some subject in the news or on campus or whatever. All right. You're going to get hate mail for me from this. I would often hide a Y in every cartoon.
No way.
That's right.
Like the signature
like
BYU
the signature Y, the oval Y,
gosh.
hidden in, just to show my family and friends, like, check out what they printed. Look,
That's
right there,
really
I put a Y.
Funny.
Right? All right, don't hate me. Of course, University of Utah is wonderful, except in November's in the fall. But, it's
so funny.
Anyway, so that's...
So you graduated from the U.
Yep, got a marketing degree in business.
Yeah, where did that take you?
Took me to Young Living, one of the many multi-level marketing companies in Utah County.
Young Living is essential oils.
Essential oils.
They got huge fields. They do their own growing and all kinds of stuff.
Well, yeah, I'm not all their growing, but
they've got some
farms.
But they do have some farms here. And
yep. So I worked for their corporate office, and I traveled North America.
And you were doing marketing?
Well, I did. It was more of a sales role, I guess. So I traveled North America doing. I put on live presentations for all of their distributors across North America. So we have an event in Oklahoma, and we get a hotel and rent out a conference room, and bring product. And I'd get up for 90 minutes, have a high energy presentation about check out lavender oil. Let's talk about lavender oil, and people would share testimonials and So I did that for 3 years, and I realized how much I hated being in a cubicle, and I hated working for somebody else, and I just realized I'm not made for the 9 to 5 punch the time card. And
a lot of people aren't. It's not for everyone.
Right. So I then started with my old business partner Tevye. We started he had it going already, but I joined forces with him, a web development company called Fiddler Online.
With Tevye.
Tevye, that's
Tevye.
right. So
Tevye with Fiddler Online.
you can tell he
Yes.
he named the company.
He embraces his name.
That's right. And so I helped consult with small businesses for 5 years on websites, online marketing, and that's what I did for 5 years. And then
So you actually got to use your degree, which is great.
yeah, I mean, not that I'd like, I remember this class, I learned this thing.
Yeah, but
But I was in the industry.
justify your degree, which is awesome.
Absolutely.
Now, at some point, I don't know when did you meet your wife?
So we met. This was when I started going to the U. I was in a YSA ward, Young Single Adult Ward. We met at the Institute building at Salt Lake Community College, the Redwood campus, and I went there, and we had a FHE activity, playing volleyball, sand volleyball, out in the courtyard of the college there, and there was a cute curly-haired, brown-haired girl, Alana. And I saw her from a distance, and time stopped, and I knew that in the pre-existence we had probably. No, I'm just kidding.
Every stereotype came out.
So I thought, wow, she's really cute. I'm gonna do what any young single adult would do and begin to stalk her. We did not have Facebook at that time to do the stalking that way. And I don't mean literally stalk her.
Yeah, sure.
So I went to the ward directory and I flipped through every page until I found her.
Found an Alana,
and it said,
you didn't know her last name.
Alana Pilatus? Like, I had no idea it was Alana Pilatus.
Yeah.
But so I knew her name. And then fate would have it that next Sunday was fast and testimony meeting, and we had the break your fast meal at the end, and there she was at the end of the line all by herself. And I introduced myself.
Meant to be.
And it was a potato bar, and we talked about how she is from Idaho and grew up on a potato farm, and that was where it all began.
The rest is history. How long have you been married now?
12 years, almost 13 years.
And you have kids?
We have 2 kids, a boy, a 3-year-old boy, and a 6-year-old girl.
Awesome.
And yeah, it's just, I mean, they're wonderful. It's just
so
like the best.
You're this young married couple. You've got this marketing stuff going on. You got life is kind of happening.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden things get crazy, and you get a calling that changes everything.
Right. So I was in that ward. They called me as the Elders Quorum president. And this is really where the impetus of leading LDS begins, because I had really no leadership experience up to this point. I'd been a district leader on my mission, but there was like 3 companions, and it's missionary.
Yeah, it's pretty
run
laid
the
out
district
for
meeting,
you.
and you do your thing. And so this was really my first leadership calling. There was well over 100 elders in my quorum, even though Doctrine and Covenants says you should only have 96 in a quorum. But nonetheless, that is what it is. And there I was. I wanted to do a good job, and I remember looking at the home teaching numbers and being like, oh, this is pathetic. I'm so glad they called me, because I'm going to figure this out. They put the man in charge that's going to make a difference.
They got Patton in there.
Yeah. It was a disaster. Okay, I didn't delegate. I tried to do everything on my own. I remember I did the old guilt trip lesson. We've all been in that.
Yes,
that
works
lesson before.
so well.
It works.
I believe guilt is one of the fruits of the Spirit. In fact.
Absolutely,
it's one of the lesser known.
So leverage that as much as you can.
Make people feel guilty. That
and
makes
I remember
them want to
after
come back.
all this hard work, home teaching percentage it dropped a percentage. Like it didn't make a difference.
Oh
right?
no.
And so obviously I met Alana, we got married, and so I was released and we moved on for that ward. But I remember just looking back, like really discouraged, like, I felt like I was going to make a difference. Like I really tried hard, but I didn't move the needle.
But you didn't know how either.
I didn't know how.
Yeah.
Right? And so we get married. We lived in a basement shoebox for about a year, and then we bought a condo. We moved into this ward. I remember showing up to the ward, and the first thing I said to my wife is, "Look how young the bishop is! Oh my goodness!" Right? And
you should have never thought that.
Right? And then within a few months, that bishop called me as his executive secretary. And then I went from executive secretary to his second counselor, and then his first counselor. And then he was released, and I got called as the high priest group leader. And when I got called as the high priest group leader, I thought, oh no.
How old were you when you got called to be a high priest group leader?
I was 26 years old.
You were in a normal married ward. You were a 26-year-old high priest group leader.
Okay, this is the Lee ward, and if you ask anybody from the Lee ward, there's nothing normal about the Lee ward. Okay?
Gotcha.
It was an inner city ward, just not a lot of older traditional established families. There's barely a youth program.
I was going to say, we just in our ward, I don't know that we've had back when there was a high priest group, as it were. Now that it's changed, right. But I don't think we ever had a high priest group leader under about 65.
Yeah. So it was definitely a unique experience.
Yeah,
for me.
and that is really unique.
Yeah. And I remember some of those feelings coming back from thinking, I've been a leader before. I got called as Elder Quorum president, and I really tried, and nothing happened. And so I was sort of like a bit anxious to approach this assignment because, I didn't do a good job the last time. At least I thought so. And I couldn't understand why I could walk into Barnes & Noble, and there'd be bookshelves full of books about business leadership, about life leadership, about all these leadership topics, but nobody was talking about leadership in the context of the church.
That's interesting.
We have leadership, meetings and
talks. There are certainly trainings, and there's the priesthood manual.
Right.
There are some things, but it doesn't talk about true leadership.
Right. No, nobody's talking about how to motivate people. Nobody's talking about how to run a meeting. Nobody's talking about public speaking, right? And so I thought, well, I'm not an expert, but maybe I can create a platform and bring experts to that platform, and we can start talking about leadership principles in the context of the church. So it was in 2010. I just started. It was just a blog and a typepad blog, and I just started reading books. And I would read a business book and then think, okay, how does this apply to church leadership and in that context? And so I would write up an article about that. And it just was sort of a slow go. And during this time, 2 years after being the high priest group leader, our bishop was called in the stake presidency. And then the phone call came to me, and there I was walking in the stake presidency's office receiving the call as a bishop. And so...
And how old were you at this time?
I was 28 at that time.
So full family ward, you have now been... You've been an elders quorum president, then you've been in a bishopric, high priest group leader, and now a bishop.
Yeah,
that is a whole lot of leadership at age 28.
Oh yeah, I was trying to take as much of it in as I could to try and figure this out. And being a bishop, and this is the thing, being a bishop is easily, and people are going to laugh at what I say, but easily the best calling in the church. It is. You are literally, not so literally, but metaphorically, standing on the sidelines of the atonement. Like what you get to see and see people develop, it's so rich. And so people would always give me like, oh, you're a bishop, like, oh, that's too bad, ha ha ha. But I'd be like, you know what, if you ever get the opportunity, say yes. It is such a good, incredible opportunity. And so during this time, as I'm trying to figure out leading LDS and produce content, I'm sort of blessed with this laboratory on the side of like, oh, I can see this problem. Oh, I never thought of that problem in the context of being bishop. And, oh, my relief society president says she's experiencing this. So it sort of gave me some content to think about and produce material around that people started to resonate with. And then after 5 years as a bishop, I got called in the stake presidency and saw a whole new perspective of leadership issues and problems that leaders face day to day that they're just sort of giving their best go at. And so in 2014, we started the podcast, and like I said, we have, or like you mentioned, we have 300 plus episodes. And then we became a nonprofit organization, 501c3 in 2016, and now we just continue to grow. And our mission is just to help Latter-day Saint leaders feel more confident leaders.
So what are some of the other things you do? You have the podcast. Mm-hmm. And then what are some of the other things that you do with Leading LDS?
So we have articles that come out, a few articles every week that if people would rather listen or read than listen. And then we put on summits as well. So we did a whole summit about motivation, because that was like the number one question people were asking us is, I get my calling, I get what I'm supposed to do, but people just don't want to do it. I ask them to do something, they don't do it. I ask them to sign up, they don't do it. How do we motivate these people, right? And so I did a whole virtual summit, just basically a virtual conference about motivation. And then we, last year, or I guess in March of this year, we did the Teaching Saints virtual summit where we talked all about teaching and how can an everyday, I may be a plumber Monday through Friday, but I'm a gospel doctrine teacher on Sunday. How can I develop my skills as a teacher to really bring excitement in the spirit to that? So we did 18 different interviews with people like Hank Smith and Jason Hewlett, who you've had on the podcast, and all these established speakers or trainers or teachers, and just asked them, how do we teach better? And
how do we
great
become
content
better teachers?
Came out of that.
Tell us about your 24-hour journey, your 24 hours of leadership, because that was amazing to me. I mean, what you were able to put together was huge. Tell us a little bit about that.
So this is, I think, last year for Giving Tuesday. So Giving Tuesday is after Black Friday, which is the Friday after Thanksgiving, and then there's Cyber Monday
and Giving Tuesday.
And then Giving Tuesday is where basically turn the attention to nonprofits and giving back. And so since we're a nonprofit, we wanted to participate in that. And so I thought, well, what I'm going to do is we have an audience all across the world. So I'm going to stay up for 24 hours, and every hour we're going to talk with a different leader in a different country.
You kind of follow the time zones.
Yeah. So I was up in the
idea.
in the middle of the night
So
talking
cool.
with somebody in Russia. We talked with a few people in Africa, Turkey. We went around the globe with different people, just hearing about how is it being an elder quorum president in Ghana or whatever it is, So
And it was fascinating to me. I checked in several times in that 24 hours. Would tune in, and first of all, I'd go, I can't believe Kurt's still up. It's amazing. But then secondly, it's interesting how the commonalities. First of all, how many of them said, here I am in this remote corner of the world. My problem is getting enough people to show up to a service project, or getting enough people to do their home teaching at the time, or ministering. But then also the different problems, things we wouldn't think of, like leaders saying, well, we have some members who live 100 miles from the chapel.
Yeah.
Things that certainly here in Utah would never dawn on me as that being an issue.
Right.
Or, hey, we don't have any young men in our ward. So, there's or one young man. We have one young man, and we have to have a young men's program. It's just fascinating to hear. What are some of the common threads of challenges that you're hearing right now, maybe throughout the church? What are some challenges leaders are facing?
The big one, obviously, with the new ministering program, it's shifted. We've had a tradition of home teaching and visiting teaching where individuals get the idea, okay, I know I'm supposed to go visit my family once a month and do that visit and then report it. And now it's the dynamic has changed where a lot of it's on the leader. Now you have to have interviews every quarter, right? The Police Study president or Elder Quorum president and their counselors have these interviews. And now, but I feel like a lot of people are just sort of sitting down with the other person, and they're just saying, well, how are your families? Well, they're fine. Okay, I guess we're done here. And then, but there's so much more that can come out of that interview.
Right.
With understanding maybe how others are approaching it, certain questions you could ask. So we've spent a lot of time on that. We've got a book on LeadingLDS called A Culture of Ministering, where we go through, okay, here's some ideas on organizing it, here's on doing the ministering interview, and we try and accumulate all these ideas from, talking to leaders across the world about how do you lead there and what can we learn from that. So.
Yeah, that's just amazing.
Yeah.
And you get, the level of participation you get, we were talking earlier about how many listeners you have and just the number of people that engage with you. It's been incredible. Do you have any that come to mind, any experiences or any letters you've gotten or anything where, people have kind of reached out to let you know that Leading LDS really helped them?
Yeah, the first one that comes to mind, that's one of my favorites. I was in North Carolina for helping one of my consulting clients out there, and I let the audience know, hey, I'm going to be in North Carolina. Put it in my newsletter. I'd love to meet you if you're in the area. So this one former bishop reached out to me, and we went out to lunch. And he told me that he was bishop of his ward, and then he got deployed to Iraq.
Oh wow!
And so, can you imagine going from being a bishop, totally immersed in the Spirit, these incredible experiences? Suddenly, you're in the middle of this desert in a war zone.
Yeah.
He said, I just felt so alienated. And he said, I listened to your podcast, and that helped me keep connected to the Spirit. And I was just like, okay, all right, I'm done here. That's I feel like my mission is accomplished. It meant so much, just to hear how people are benefiting from the stories that we're sharing of leaders and about different concepts. Because the way I look at it is that I noticed as a bishop, I didn't get to prepare what I knew. Well, basically what I'm saying is you don't know what's going to walk into that bishop's office in any day.
Yeah, you can't prep for it.
You have a list of appointments, and there you go. And I remember just feeling like someone would bring an issue, and I would just be like, I don't know,
Sure.
And so what we try and do is really target specific topics and issues that a leader may face unexpectedly, and talk about and bring some context and resources to that concept, so that when they do face that problem, objection, question, whatever it is, they can think back, oh yeah, I remember those 3 things I learned on that podcast or on that article, and just be better prepared for some of those things, because there's some sticky situations.
One of my favorite, I think my favorite thing about what you do is the How I Lead series.
Mm-hmm.
The How I Lead series to me is fascinating. I like it both from the point of view of when it's something that pertains to my calling, but even more so when it's not, when it's how I lead as a Relief Society president or as a young women's advisor or things like that. Tell us a little bit about How I Lead, what those interviews are.
Yeah, I've heard Elder Holland say that the lay ministry of the church is one of the greatest modern day miracles of our time, because no other organization that I can think of really does what we do, where you could be a comedian by day, Monday through Friday, or you could be an actor, or you could be a plumber, a mechanic, and then be asked to lead and to step in this role as the bishop, as the Relief Society president,
right,
as an elders quorum president, whatever it is, and to see what that does for us as it gives us opportunity to make mistakes, to grow, to develop in those leadership capacities. And so early on, I was just so intrigued by how the other guy did it. And that's one thing we didn't, there's no connection. I mean, you can go to, if you're an elders quorum president, you can go to the next ward in your building and say, hey, elders quorum president, how did you handle this problem?
Yeah.
But it's so interesting to hear how leaders across the world are approaching different
right.
problems. Like I interviewed a Relief Society president in Australia, and she has little Australian Aborigines in her ward, and other people that would have to travel 9 hours to church. Right? They would come on late Friday, they'd stay all day Saturday, Sunday, and so by hearing not just how they solve that unique issue, but just hearing that they experience it, it allows you to step back and think, like, I don't experience that, but that gives me an idea or some inspiration on this other issue I'm dealing with,
right,
about fellowshipping, or the importance of my quorum activity or whatever it is. And so we just try and find everyday people. And it's interesting, as getting guests on a podcast is not as easy as it looks sometimes.
It can be very tricky.
But when you go to a normal guy or gal and say, I want to interview you, and they look at me like, what on earth would I have to say? And everybody says that. And I say, just trust me. I promise you there's something. And these interviews are remarkable.
They are.
That come out, and just sharing their experiences is really fulfilling.
Yeah. And if people want to hear the interviews, they can go wherever they get a podcast. If you're listening to our podcast, 99.99% chance that wherever you're listening to this podcast, you can find Kurt's podcast. It's called Leading LDS. If you start typing in Leading LDS on Stitcher or on Apple or wherever.
Yeah.
How else, though, can people get involved? You've got some leadership levels that people can get involved in it. Yeah,
so we have what are called core leaders. And basically, there's not some rich uncle behind the scenes that's making this operation go. We are a nonprofit, so we function on donations. And so we have our core leaders that are our monthly or yearly contributors, subscribing contributors. And so I'm intrigued by the idea of creating this organization all, built by the people for the people, or by the leaders for the leaders. And so we have even $1 donations coming from around the world, and that's it can be as little as $1 or $10 or $15, and then we try and create additional value and content for those that are helping us build Leading LDS.
And this is not just lip service. I have been in the core leader program
We appreciate it.
Many months now, because I believe in the mission. I just think it's really important, and I know that there are great resources within the church also, and more so. We now have a once a month teacher training that we didn't used to have,
right.
but I think at the same time, maybe for elders quorum presidents to be able to get together, or Relief Society presidents or young women's presidents, to be able to tune in and go, I'm not alone.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's what's nice. When I listen to your podcast and I'll hear somebody say, hey, I have this young man that for 2 years we couldn't reach him, and here's what we did. Sometimes it helps me. When I was in the young men's program, it would help me to think, oh, maybe there's something we can do. But it was also helpful to go, wow, we're not the only ones with young men we can't reach. We're not the only ones who have trouble getting enough people to show up to a service project or people to show up to a ward activity. It helps us kind of bond. And that's one of the great missions I think that you guys accomplish.
Yeah. No, I love that part. And I get those emails saying, I did feel alone. And I remember those moments as a bishop feeling, there's one moment in particular where I had just, this is my job before I started my own business, where I got demoted, and I just felt awful. And I showed up that night to do bishop appointments, and I was just so drained. I remember shutting the door thinking, I wish I had a bishop. Because I was my own bishop.
You really didn't have a
Yeah.
bishop. You had the stake presidency.
Right. But then the Spirit reminded me, well, you have a stake president. So I went to the stake center and had a good chat with my stake president. But yeah, there's this, and there's the quote that I use at the end of my podcast by President Hinckley from a quote, or from a talk that he gave at BYU in I want to say 69, called "The Loneliness of Leadership." And if you know a leader in your life, like, just send them the link to that talk, because he talks about the loneliness of leadership for which we cannot shrink or run away. And there's such a loneliness of leadership, but I want the community of leaders in the gospel to know that we're all in the ditches with them, trying to figure it out, and there's support, and we're all praying for each other.
It's one of my favorite things about our church. When I explain our lay ministry, it's so fascinating to me because, like you said, we have the everyday 9-to-5 guy, whomever, the 28-year-old could be the bishop or whatever. We also have CEOs of multi-billion-dollar corporations working in the nursery, working in the library.
Yeah, it's incredible.
It's incredible to see, and to be able to see that one day, you're doing whatever, right? Right now, my wife and I oversee the YSA. One day, you're overseeing the YSA in your program in your ward. The next day, you're a stake president. The next day, you're teaching the 10-year-olds. Like, I love that so much that it's not like you apply for jobs. You don't. I think it's really unique.
Yeah, definitely inspired.
No question, it's inspired. It's awesome.
Yeah.
We're starting to get a little bit tight on time, but I'm curious to know if you have one overriding piece of advice, the one that you give most often, like the one thing, if you could just say to all the leaders who are out there, is there one commonality or one thing that you hope that all lay leaders within the church know?
Absolutely. My mind first goes to, we sometimes mix up the intentions of individuals. And so, for example, if there's a leader listening, maybe take a moment and think about that the big problem that you face. And a lot of times it comes down to, they'll say, well, my people the people I lead are just not motivated. Maybe they're a little too lazy. They just don't understand. And as leaders, we often misunderstand motivation problems, or we often misunderstand ability problems as motivation problems. When in reality, if we approach it saying not, oh, they're not motivated, how do I motivate them? But instead say, what skill or ability can I teach them or show them so that they're actually enabled to succeed? And so, and I hear it all the time as leaders talk about different issues they're following, and I often ask them, do you think it's a motivational problem or do you think it's an ability problem? And 9 times out of 10, they say, motivational problem. I say, I promise you, if you go back and approach it as an ability problem, you'll have all sorts of new ideas to approach it. And it could be as simple, because a lot of times what happens, for instance, ministering. Well, my quorum are really excited. They're not getting out and seeing people. They're not serving people. Well, is that a motivational problem or an ability problem? And a lot of people say, well, yeah, I mean, it's so easy. You just call them or text them or invite them over for game night. And I said, I promise you there's a certain percentage of your quorum that doesn't know how to make a phone call and invite them over to their house. They don't know how to host people in their house. They don't know how to, maybe they don't know how to send a text message, whatever it is. And so by stepping back and approaching problems first as an ability problem, I'm sure there's some motivational problems that exist there, but these people in this gospel, I mean, the gospel is remarkable, and the saints that are therein, I promise you, they are very motivated people. And we should look at it as an ability problem first.
Gosh, Kurt, that is so... It seems so simple as you're saying it, and I've heard you say that before, but for some reason it's really hitting me that, I've been in callings where I didn't do it because I didn't know how to do it, or a home teaching situation where I wasn't sure what was going on with the family, so maybe I'm just not going to go. Mm-hmm. And I think that being able to talk that through is what a great approach. I want to make sure we get a plug for you because we do have a good number of listeners now. So you do this, basically, this is your full-time job. I mean, you've left your job and you do this, but you do have a side job that's really, really fun. So I just want to make sure we get 3 minutes because there may be some people out there wanting to hire you Tell us a little bit about Draw You Funny.
Yeah, so if you go to Instagram and search for Draw You Funny, that's U is Y-O-U, just how it's spelled. Draw You Funny, and 2 or 3 times a month I get hired to be a caricature artist, and I go to corporate events, weddings, and caricature art is interesting because people think like, oh, that's like an interesting idea, and well, so we're not hosting a carnival, so I don't know if it would be a good fit. But once they get me there, they see like just the joy it brings to people as they sit down and they get to laugh at themselves, and they're walking around the room comparing drawings, and then they have a keepsake to take home from that event
and they're very exaggerated. You draw these incredibly exaggerated, hilarious pictures.
Yeah.
And you can see the joy in people's faces.
Yeah. So if you do have a corporate party, or I've even gone on a Friday, into a break room and just set up my stuff, and I draw them all digitally and print them out in color. And they're a lot of fun, and it's a fun way for me. I love handing a caricature to somebody and seeing them just crack up.
It's awesome. So people can find you there on Instagram, and if people want to find out more about Leading LDS, what's the best way to find out about the organization of Leading LDS?
Yeah, so obviously leadinglds.org, or obviously subscribe to our podcast. And we have a great newsletter that we send out weekly with just different leadership thought and perspective. Jump in and type in a topic that select your calling on the website and see the content there. And I promise you it will help your leadership.
Awesome. Kurt, you've been a great mentor for me, as I've mentioned on this show before, and you've kind of paved the way. You were an early one with the podcasts. I don't know that there are many Latter-day Saint focused podcasts running longer than yours. You were on the cutting edge of the podcast movement. So what you do is so inspiring and so fantastic, and we're going to wrap it up with the question we ask all of our guests. This will be interesting to me. I've always wanted to ask you this question, which is, Kurt, what does being a member of the church mean to you?
Being a member of the church means to me, it brings meaning into all things of life. The fact that we had a Savior come to this world, live, teach us incredible teachings, and then give the ultimate sacrifice and atone for our sins is just remarkable, and understanding His grace. And I remember oftentimes as a bishop, it's such a unique opportunity to be in a calling where an individual comes in and they'll share something they're so ashamed of, or they're so embarrassed by, but they know that they need to share that with their priesthood leader to move forward with that repentance process. And I'd often look at them and say, isn't it remarkable that we have the atonement of Jesus Christ, or we'd have nothing to talk about here? Not only would your soul be lost, my soul would be lost.
I love it.
And that brings so much meaning into my life, knowing that, regardless of whatever you've done, there's always hope. There's always a way out. There's always a next step. And whatever you're dealing with, the Savior has dealt with it. And to me, His grace just fills my life with meaning.
It's awesome. Kurt, thank you so much. So Kurt Frankham, artist, first off, because you started doing that at an early age, but a true leader, a podcaster, and a servant all at once. Thank you for sharing your Latter-day life with us. Appreciate it. My special thanks to my dear friend Kurt Frankham. As I mentioned, the enthusiasm and energy that man has for the gospel, isn't he amazing? And if you are not listening to Leading LDS, I highly recommend it. The number of things you will pick up, whatever your calling is, and I'll listen to episodes with a Relief Society president or a Young Women's president or a bishop, or things that maybe don't pertain to me. Oh, I learned so much. There's so many good saints out there doing such great work. Thank you again, Kurt, for all of the awesome stuff you do and for being on the show. I appreciate it. Okay, this week in my Latter-day life, it's an interesting day, September 17th, which is the date of release of this episode. 24 years ago, on this exact date, I married my wife. This is our 24th anniversary today, as of the day of the airing of this episode. And a couple of thoughts from that. A few weeks ago, I was with a friend of mine, a dear friend, who is somewhat of a newlywed. He's been married just over a year, and we were talking about how you build a family culture. And he was talking about what he and his wife have in common and what they don't have in common, and kind of how do they have their own lives for themselves and their identity as a marriage. And we started kind of sharing some of the things we have in common. And a little bit about my wife. First of all, I love doing this. I love doing the podcast, and I'm happy to be on camera or in front of a microphone or whatever it is. I have had several requests for my wife to be on the show. It'll probably never, ever, ever happen. She is so much happier behind the scenes. She is not the type of person to put herself out there and does not enjoy being in public or speaking in public. That's not her way. She is a true servant. She likes to be behind the scenes doing real work. A couple things about my wife as well. You all know that I love Disneyland. I've talked about it many times. My wife does not care for Disneyland. Not her favorite thing. My wife loves to camp. She loves being in the outdoors. And guess what? That's not my favorite thing. And I like certain shows. I like competition and sports and reality shows where people are competing for something. And my wife really enjoys dramas. And I like certain kinds of books, especially political books. I read a lot of those. And my wife enjoys other kinds of books, more things about the church. And we really don't have a lot in our day-to-day lives in common. My wife is working on her doctorate degree, and I have zero interest in school or education. She's an occupational therapist, which is a very specialized, somewhat medical degree, and I know nothing about that world. And I love going into my job and sales meetings, and boy, the thought for her of having to present in front of a bunch of people and convince them to buy something, she would just pass. We have so few things in common. Even our music, we have so little music that we both like. But there are a few things that my wife have in common. And that is that my wife loves our children. And I love our children. And my wife loves the gospel of Jesus Christ. And I love the gospel of Jesus Christ. And my wife loves me. And I love her. I love her so much that once a year or so I go camping. And once every couple of years my wife goes to Disneyland with me. And sometimes my wife will let me put on punk rock music in the house. And sometimes I'll let her put folk music on in the house. And sometimes I'll watch a movie, like a romantic movie with her. And sometimes she'll watch an action movie with me. And every once in a while my wife will sit down with me while I watch a Laker game. Because we love each other. And our foundation is based in the things of the gospel. And when I watch my wife faithfully serve, I fall in love with her more every single day. As she teaches our kids about the gospel of Jesus Christ, as she teaches our kids about being a good human being and about serving, all these other things, the other stuff is just noise. I'm pretty sure if there was a compatibility test to being married, my wife and I would fail miserably. But I love what makes her her. And she loves what makes me, me. And we don't try to change each other. We embrace each other. But again, our foundation is built on this beautiful gospel of Jesus Christ. And that is why we've been married for 24 years, still going strong. And our plan, and so far so good, is to be married for the eternities with our 7 beautiful children and our posterity. And I am so grateful for that. So to my wife, happy anniversary. She will be more embarrassed that I'm even talking about her than I ever get actually being the one talking. But happy anniversary, sweetheart. I sure love you. And that is what is going on this week in my latter-day life. Thank you so much for tuning in. I want to remind you that we're not only doing this on podcast, but you can certainly listen to the audio, but also the video. We have the video going on Facebook, as well as in YouTube. You just got to search for Latter-day Lives. If you're not following us on Facebook, that's where we do most of our updates. Please come follow us. We put up a lot of fun stuff from our guests. So until next week, when we've got another wonderful episode for you, please remember, as always, there is a great big beautiful world out there. So go be in it, just not of it. Thanks for listening.